begin the February 3rd, 2025 Finance Committee meeting. Have a quorum. Thank you all for coming out. And it turns out I think we have a bunch of work we can accomplish tonight. I've been asked to remind everyone to raise your voices so that it can be heard by people on the board and then recorded, especially in this room, which I think the system is great. So let's start with approving the minutes of our two last meetings, starting with January 27th.
Here is the 27th.
The correction I have, if my memory serves me right, is the select board budget.
Yep.
7D, a motion to table until the select board chair is able to attend at finance. I recall that it was tabled to give the chair of finance committee an opportunity to speak with the chair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There was a discussion about the vacant position.
Yes.
Chair.
And I have touched base with Diane. She had some family issues and we talked this week. David, do you have a correction on that?
Yes, I do. Thank you. In the town clerk's first line, it says $79,000 of the GDB funds will be used to digitize the record. That's Community Preservation Act funds.
Oh, okay. CPA funds. Okay,
And that's the only correction I have.
okay. Yep.
Any other?
Yeah, 7E, I think the zoning board of appeals, that probably should be pulled out.
Oh, yeah.
The invitation.
Here we go.
Any other corrections to the January 27th minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as corrected? There's a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and that's approved. January 29th, and thank you, Sophie, for taking the minutes of the January 29th meeting. Any corrections to January?
Got it. Yep.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. All right. Couple of scheduling issues, or not issues, but updates. So I understand that the school department can't come in until the very last minute, which is the 24th. So that's what we're aiming at, to have the schools come in. That doesn't give us much time to finalize the FinCom report after that. So I'm hoping that will be the one and only thing we do on the 24th. And then it's up to the races.
Yeah, and as long as they don't, I mean, we basically only have the bottom line, so.
That's
And then March 10th is Minuteman. Okay. Good intentions.
So, yeah, we're gonna have Minuteman come in on March 10th. Capital planning is March 12th. Schools, March 24th. And I have been talking with ACMi. They have a warrant article for additional funding, and this hasn't been confirmed yet, but they may come in on the 12th as well. But that's up in the air.
Al has his hand up.
Al?
You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Sorry. Are we confirmed with Minuteman on March 10th at 7:30?
That's what I understand, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm. Great, thank you.
All right, let's go into budgets. Dave and Sophie, you left off with a few.
Yes, we do. We have the planning budget on page 74 and 75. And after that, we do the redevelopment board budget, it's on the next following page. My partner Sophie takes copious notes, so if you have any questions, she has the notes. You will notice that on the salaries line,
What page are you on?
I'm on page 74. There is an increase in the salary line. One of the things that we talked a lot about was economic development throughout the town. And what projects are going on, what projects are perhaps being considered in the future. We talked about the 50-unit condo that's being built on Mass Ave between Highland and Brattle Street. We talked about the project that's going on in Medford at Mass Ave above Alien Stone Shop and all that. We talked about that one. We talked about the one on Broadway at Winter Street that's been completed. And when they also talked about the possibility of a development that might take place in the future between Lake Street and Chandler Street in East Arlington. That's in discussion right now as to what to do with the whole block. Another discussion that's really in its infant stage is the possibility, there is a vacant building on Mass Ave right next to the Legion. It's the next story. It's not an old building, it's been there for a while. And the building's completely empty. And it's talked about possibly doing something with that in the future. So,
Where is that one?
Simon,
Where is that one?
right next door to the Legion
Oh,
and east on Mass Ave. And we also talked about up in the Heights, a couple of projects going on. Well, they were going on, it seems to come to a stop for some reason, but it's still in the works. Right across from the Agostino's, where Roadwood's cleanest was, that area, it's all boarded up, now it's all, I'm not sure what's in there. So there's definitely, development going on in all these places. That's what we talked a lot about that. And we also talked about, again, the vacant businesses. And from what I understand, in the center with Argentinian restaurants, I understand that the people that own that property in agreement with someone to put another restaurant there.
Yeah, signs there.
In agreement. And then across the street, although there's no sign, there's a new niche shop that used to be where Papagino's was. You wouldn't notice it unless you stopped your car and looked, because there's no sign.
New residents open or they're
Oh,
renting?
they're open, they're open.
During business.
They're open, but if you were just riding by, you wouldn't even know it was there.
Huh.
But I guess that's part of the construction that's meant to mask that unknown.
That's part of that. It used to be in First Square.
So, Sophie, do you have anything to add?
Sure. On the details, the notes that I have, specifically, so in the salary detail, there was a mistake last year where the last employee listed, senior transportation planner was listed at a step 5.6 last year, which was a mistake. It should have been a step 6.7. So that's why there's a jump from a 5.6 in last year's book and a 7.8 in this year's book without a reclassification. It's just, it was a mistake last year. Other than that, in the expenses, the training and professional development, the current budget really increased the past couple of years with this new, with Claire, because she really, she basically budgets about $1,000 per employee, and there are lots that have advanced degrees that need continued education or continued training and certification. So that's what the budget's for, and we'll be watching it and see if it's actually used or not going forward. We've recommended that maybe they look at the in-state travel line. Given that the training and professional development has gone up, that in-state travel line, the actuals are really low, because I think it's actually being incorporated into training and professional development as the costs. So there's something to look at in the future there to see if we can combine those two expenses. Other than that, the dues and memberships are high, but again, because there were 3 new employees that had AICP memberships in the 2023, since the 2023 budget. So that was the reason for that increase. And then the technology and printing line has to do with the software and their plotter. And there's a contract on that, and we haven't, she hasn't gotten back to us on it, but we did have a question because I think about a year or two ago, we were told the contract had lapsed, but they were still making the regular payments on it at the same price. So, but that is all for software and what that's budgeted. So I think that's all I have in my notes.
Okay, with that, I'll make a motion that we accept the planning budget 726,378.
Second.
Questions, Michael, Topher.
Dave, Sophie, referred to a number of ongoing developments in town.
Yes.
And pardon, I'm trying to speak to the entire room here. Vacancies that are being looked at, other vacancies that are being filled. I don't get a sense from the budget details or from the review of vacancies what they do all day.
What, who does all that?
The folks who plan and develop.
I don't know, you have to ask them.
All right, please, are you raising your hand to get a response to that?
Yes.
All right, first we'll go with Jordan and then Ann.
Well, my curiosity, so all, like, what's done in-house versus is there anything contracted out, because I'm looking at the budget, and usually in planning and development, departments, there's a lot of consultant services, third parties, real estate, et cetera, and I look at this budget and I would see most of that work is done in-house, is that correct?
Yes.
As opposed to using third parties?
Yeah.
So that, to me, that would make sense.
Annie, do you want to contribute to that?
Yes, on the financial and budget information page on the town's website, there is a document called the Town Manager's Budget Financial Plan. And if you look at, we're in here, this is the planning department, and general government. But if you look at any of the departments listed in this document, you will see that there's a pretty good profile of it. Program description, staffing, objectives, program costs, major accomplishments for the previous year, and a org chart, and so on and so forth. So this is usually a pretty good source to answer the question you're asking.
Yeah, I looked at that.
Because, all right, where, Michael still has Michael.
I do know that with the senior transportation plan, a lot of work being done on what to do with Pleasant Street, in regards to transportation. And I know Sophie, and she lives in that neighborhood, the residents of that neighborhood have pretty good bigger quiet meeting with the planning department. And we also talked about perhaps maybe including in that project as to what to do with Pleasant Street, the roadway. It's a state highway, so there's other things that have to work in it. Talking about putting bike lanes on that road, that's being discussed. So we can add to that. It shows you at that meeting.
Michael still has the floor.
Okay.
If anyone has anything more to add to his question, what do people do? You raise your hand.
Well, I have a partial answer to the funding. The planning department gets a lot of capital money for their planning work. I'm looking at, they have several bike projects, bike improvement projects going.
But I think Michael's question is, what do they do? Not, at least so far, the question is, what is it that they do on a day-to-day basis? Does anyone want to add to that we have not already talked about?
I would add that the environmental planner works a lot with all of the open space committee, conservation committee, all of the friends groups and whatever to coordinate how the natural world's coordinated in all the open spaces.
Do you want any more? Michael, do you have any more questions?
No, question remains.
All right, Topher?
Yeah, I was wondering on the offsets, I'd ask this. The CDBG administrators offset presumably funds the CDBG administrators, so that's fine. But I was curious, there's a school offset, which I think maybe goes to half of the sustainability benefit. Is that where that goes, the fund balance? And then I have no idea where the CDBG planning offset goes. I was curious as to what positions those last two offsets.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. No, I think I can go.
Okay. Were you able to find out what the school offset funds?
Sophie, do we ask that question?
Sophie's got her hand up, sorry.
Right. So for the school offsets, I think we did not specifically ask. I think that has to do with even environmental things when they work on the school and sustainability and those types of issues. We did ask about the CDBG planning offset. That is part of 3 positions. So 3 positions are used for that offset, and that's the assistant director, the senior planner, and the environmental planner. So a portion of each of those 3 positions goes towards the offset.
I think the sustainability manager is shared with the schools.
That was mine, I think. Okay, but if we could find out, that'd be nice.
It looks like it's exactly half of the sustainability managers. So
Yeah, that's true. All right.
Anything else, Topher? Chuck?
So a couple questions. Do we know how much total grant money this team brought in last year? Is that in that report, Andy, that you showed?
Good question. I think you'd have to read the whole thing, it's like 4 pages long. So I don't know for sure.
There are a bunch of grant.
But I know they do bring in a lot of grant money, and I think this question has been asked at town meeting, and the answer was like pretty massive compared to their budget.
Yeah, I'd like to get a number if we could. And I think that could answer Michael's question. What does this team do all day? Because I know they write a lot of grants. And my question would be, how is it worth the investment? Which leads to my second question. The economic development coordinators, a role I think we introduced relatively recently, is that true? Or she was hired relatively recently? Okay, do we know what the return on that investment is? Because if you look at all the vacancies up and down Mass Ave, you wonder. So it would be good to understand, I don't know if we can, relatively new, the metrics of that role and how it performs and what actually the investment in that role has returned for the town. Someone that's going around knocking on doors of businesses and landlords and trying to get them to invest in the town. So that would be a good question for my take, specifically, for that role. And my last question is a little bit less financially impactful. Dues and membership is over $1,000 per person. And I've managed a lot of people that had dues and memberships, and none of them were that high. So that's a pretty, I'd like to know what those are. That's a lot of dues, a lot of memberships, a lot of expensive organizations to belong to, and it's, tripled, increasing staff too, but that's pretty significant.
Sophie, I think you mentioned what the dues and memberships are. Do you want to repeat what the dues and memberships were?
If you're speaking, you're on mute, Sophie.
Sorry. So yes, the dues and memberships are sort of, they're also sort of combined with the training and professional development. I don't have the breakout, but the big issue is the 3 new AICP qualified employees that were added in the past couple years. That's why there's such a jump, and those are just higher level degrees that require continued education to maintain them and to be part of the associations for those employees for that type of certification. I did want to point out that we were told that there will be 2 reclassifications. The environmental planner and the CDBG should show up in the reclassification plan later. And I'm sorry, I lost track of what else to answer.
I think that
The investment of the economic coordinator, the return on that investment.
Okay, so that is a more complicated question. We were told that last year at town meeting voted to increase the fees for vacant buildings. So it's sort of, they don't have complete control over what they can charge when there are vacant buildings, and that goes through town meeting. Also, the difficulty is with the landlords that sometimes are just very more complicated landlords and who don't mind leaving the buildings empty because they are difficult to negotiate with renters. So yes, the economic development coordinator works on that and pushes on it. And a lot of times they ignore the letters about a warning about fees, et cetera, until the very last day. So a lot of that is a lot of follow-up work. But again, the fees are set by town meeting, not by the planning department.
Right, so that's the fee. Do we know how many vacancies the investment in this role closed last year?
I do not have that number.
And I wouldn't expect you to know, Sophie, but it's the same point. Some metric to say, look, we've got someone who, we're paying a decent amount to help us fill those gaps. And it'd be good to understand what that result is.
Chuck, did you send these questions to Dave and Sophie?
Yeah, yes, I did. Yep.
And
right. We had I think we had already had our meeting. But I think, for example, one property that's a good example is the Tango restaurant in the center. We were told about a year or 2 ago, we've been following this since COVID and asking the question about that space. And the economic development coordinator will go out and help, find potential deals and potential tenants. And we hear about them, and then nothing happens in the next year. And it's not the town's fault. It's really the landlord that's involved. That's extremely difficult. And so it's hard to say that just because it didn't rent out and didn't fill, that's a failure on the town's part. It's really, it's not for lack of trying from the town, is my understanding.
Yes, and an example of that would be the 3.5-story brick building next to the Legion that's been empty now for over 2 years.
Yeah.
And the landlord, is in no great hurry to occupy it. Likewise, where Tangle is, that landlord that owns that whole block, whoever they are, they're not in great, they've negotiated before with other potential tenants.
Yeah.
Only during the negotiation, they raised the rent, and the potential tenant said, see you later. So it's not that the town's not doing what it's doing, it's a combination of, a lot of the landlords are tough to deal with.
Oh, I understand, but that's why we hired a person too, right? You know, business development is about sales, and when, you know, you gotta make things happen. So it would be good to understand, you know, my general question, what's the return on that role? That's my general question.
Right, Alan and Jennifer?
When this position was first created, one of the questions we asked was really simple. In order to fund the position, to make it self-sustaining, you need, I forget the number, you go through the calculations, there's maybe $500,000 in additional property tax revenue every year to fund, or something, a fairly big number. And that was going to be very, you know, which it's hard to do in a growth constrained town. So the further justification was a quality of life thing, filling up the empty storefronts and whatever, which doesn't have a easy to calculate financial return. It's more of a, you know, community quality of life.
Intangible.
But in terms of dollar, you know, invest a dollar, get a dollar back, it would be very difficult to calculate it. We weren't going to get there.
You
know,
can't have
we
intangibles.
weren't because of growth. I can tell you the one big triumph a number of years ago was getting work cars coming in.
Getting who?
Work cars.
Yeah.
Because that, you know, we were thinking of the, you know, work where you live where you work, build up a startup community within Arlington. This was back when we wanted to put work cars in the DAV, for example. Nice extra building there, things like that, but that never really happened. But it turned into more of a quality of life that's a lot harder to quantify.
Sure.
Okay, Jennifer?
Yeah, just a couple things. One, the frustration you're expressing, I think is not new. We've all had that frustration and felt it. The information that I was told that really,
Jennifer has the floor.
so the information that I was told that really, sort of woke me up a little bit is understanding that the three most problematic landlords in the center, what I understand is that they own several hundred properties across the greater Boston area. So it really doesn't matter if one or two properties are not empty, because they can write that off against the taxes. It's, you know, so there is, and there's some other backstory issues with why those particular landlords are really problematic. So that's one thing. A couple more things. Talking about the visible things that I, as a citizen, see the planning department do. They certainly go out to bid for these reports. They manage the process. They work with the consultants. They do a lot of public outreach for, you know, good community service reasons, and also because it's required. They also liaison and work very intensely with both the planning department, both the redevelopment board and the, what's the other name?
Zoning board.
Zoning board, yeah, thanks for that. So you'll see a lot of their work if you look at town meeting reports, you know, sort of, or if you go to any of those meetings. So that's what, that doesn't cover everything they do, but that's what I, as a citizen, see them doing.
Other questions on the plan budget?
Just want to make a quick point. We talk about empty buildings, full buildings. It really doesn't change the tax revenue unless we put a pot shop or a restaurant or something. So the benefit again is more quality of life. We don't like plywood on the windows, but it doesn't, putting a tenant in doesn't increase our revenue.
Oh, does it?
No. Well,
It doesn't increase our revenue.
It does increase our revenue.
No, it is.
It would be good to measure this role.
Yeah, I mean,
Pick financials, pick intangibles, whatever. It would be good to measure this role and the improvements that we're getting. I'll stop, I'm sorry.
Other questions, comments on this budget? All right, we have a motion to approve this budget at 378. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
I mean, I'm an aye,
Who's the
so.
no?
Chuck is a no.
All right,
excuse me, what's the number?
I was the no.
726,378.
Did I do I have the wrong sheet? 615,539?
Are you looking at the tax five?
Okay.
There's the appropriation and the taxation.
I'll find it.
726,370. All right. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in favor. All opposed? 2. Next on your list, David and Sophie.
Yes, redevelopment board. That's on page 78. There are no changes in this budget in 2025. So I'll move that we accept the budget figure of $12,800.
Second.
All right, any discussion or questions?
I did ask this ahead of time. I was just curious, what are the, unclassified expenses? Any sense of that?
So did you have that in your notes?
I do. The other unclassified expenses have been going towards usually just additional printing and advertising when they no longer have sufficient budget or room in that line.
They should just increase the advertising, right? Okay, thank you.
There's another one, when they have the redevelopment board meetings, you know, like the zoning board, they have their own recorder. A redevelopment board, when they have their meetings, they do all their minutes of the meeting themselves. They don't have anybody else come in a part-time way. They do it all, they generate right there.
I think the director of planning actually.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Or maybe there's this one.
Any other questions or comments on the redevelopment board budget? Sophie has Sophie?
I just want to add that we were told that all permit money goes to the general fund. So if anybody's trying to track anything, there are lots of permit fees that come through the redevelopment board, but everything goes to the general fund and doesn't show up here.
All right, I don't see anyone's hand raised, so all in favor of the redevelopment board budget as printed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yes. David, you have anything?
That concludes our budgets with the exception of the select board's budget that this committee still has discussed.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Sophie, for starting us off. All right, other budgets. Inspections for fire?
Fire department is ready. Control, a little bit bigger. Which budget?
Fire.
The fire department. So the fire department budget is on, is 125, 126. Very similar to last year's, actually salaries is down a bit, and expenses is identical to the prior year. I can go through some of the questions that we received in advance of the meeting with Chief Kelly. The data for the calls, both by category and by station, has been uploaded to our website and SharePoint. I also have them here if anyone has any questions. Broken down by station, you get 42% of the calls going into the headquarters in the center, 37% going Highland, and 20% going up Park Circle. That's where the calls are initially directed. Responses are a little bit different because responses, sometimes you get multiple stations responding to the same call, but that's the breakdown of where the calls are initially routed.
So, number of calls by Armstrong alone would actually be 0 because, the fire department does join Armstrong on every call, one way or another. So AFD responds to all calls. AFD does not transport on 976 of the calls with Armstrong, but they are there, they are present. OT expenses, they do consistently have sizable OT expenses, 473 budgeted last year, 473 budgeted this year, and I think there's a good chance they will go over that budget, both last year and this year. And it's a wide definition of vacancies that causes it. It's not just the unfilled positions, which they keep a pretty tight roster. They rarely have vacancies for too long. I think the roster right now shows 1 vacancy, which actually has been filled. So not a lot of true vacancies, but you do have a couple firefighters out on injured leave. You have 1 firefighter out on extended sick leave. You have 2 firefighters of activated military duty. And then you also have firefighters going to EMT training. So those are the types of additional vacancies that cause the OT. And it's just hard to kind of plan around that because it just keeps recurring one way or another. One of those categories continues to recur each year. Personal expenses, someone asked about personal expense, and that's a union benefit. If a firefighter goes long enough without using a sick day, they get a personal day, which they can either use as a personal day or cash out after a year. So that's what the personal day expenses are. Vacation expenses, similarly, a union benefit that they negotiated for is firefighters can sell back 30 hours of vacation time at the end of the year. And that's just something that they have to estimate. They say generally the young firefighters don't sell back their vacation because they only get 2 weeks. But the more senior firefighters will sell back the 30 hours. But that's what that line relates to. The clothing allowance, I think maybe last year they had a clothing allowance. This year it's included in uniforms. That's just some, change of categories where you see uniforms down there on the, towards the bottom. Sorry. Yeah, no problem. So the EMT stipend, that's paid for all firefighters that are certified as EMT, and it's pretty much an across-the-board benefit because I believe every firefighter is a qualified EMT. So it's a kind of a general stipend that I think most of them get the benefit of. The R&M ground landscaping, so that was something related to kind of new categories this year. There's something called R&M building and grounds. And the chief was actually thrown off a little bit by it. He says that, because I think you got a question on, where they spend the landscaping fees. He says all of that money goes towards maintaining actual buildings. They don't spend any money on landscaping. Computer maintenance and the data processing. The biggest expense there is that the fire pays $19,000 licensing fee for records management system, and that's just something that they get hit with. They don't really, do a lot of work. They just pay the bill on that front. But there is some maintenance that goes along with that licensing fee, and that's where the additional fees relate to. But the bulk of it is the $19,000 licensing fee. So now the motor equipment repairs, the way it works is that the fire pays two maintenance folks to maintain both the fire and police vehicles. And all that work is done under the police station. There's a big garage there on the side where they have the fire trucks going in and out of and the police cars going in and out of. They do as much maintenance as they can. Of course, they have to send it out for some additional services sometimes. But there's no crossover with the DPW. I think we might have got a few questions on if there's any crossover with DPW. I think it's maybe a little bit more specialized, but the fire picks up all of the maintenance of both police and fire, and they do as much as they can in-house and send out the rest. Moving along. So yeah, as I mentioned, all the call breakdown is uploaded to SharePoint. Overtime, you know, again, you know, they try to plan around it, some of it's apparently inevitable. Big medical care bills, which is a great question, Topher. I think you asked that, any big medical care bills coming this year? I think the chief said that there is a line item for it, hospital and medical care. There's $25,000 budgeted last year, $25,000 budgeted this year. He says that there is something, but it's not gonna, he doesn't, not expect it to exceed the 25,000, but he said it could any year. And he says that's, you know, I think we kind of agree it's a little bit of a quirk of the system that the town is self-insured, okay, but the fact that the fire department itself is self-insured seems a little odd. You know, it seems like something like that would maybe go to the insurance department, the insurance budget, but either way, that's the way it is. It's not a big deal this year, but it's just kind of a quirk of the system. And it was a great question, Toby, because I think a few years ago there was a $40,000 to $50,000. Yeah, so.
That came up,
Yeah, and you know, I can understand the town is self-insured, but the fire department budget, I don't think they're quite big enough to self-insure, you know, all of one budget. So, nothing this year, but, you know, maybe something to keep an eye on. So, how many personnel get the education stipend? That's in the, that's actually in the details, and you can see most of them do. It's, what did he say? He said even when you get all, just getting all your licenses gets you about 75% of the way there. So all of them walk in the door with about 75% of the required credits, so there's not a lot of, not a lot of effort to get the additional credits, so yeah, it's pretty,
I think I'll go.
yeah, it is.
I didn't see this.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And the decrease in salaries is just, you know, more junior firefighters replacing some of the senior ones that retired. And I think I discussed the motor vehicles. So that's the summary. The details are there. I did kind of tick and tie the details and went back and forth, you know, so how the numbers break out and they explain them. I did reach out to Alex just to get a little bit more detail on the breakout, they do all tick and tie. So, any questions or should I motion for approval?
Why don't you make a motion?
Sure. With that, I move to approve the fire department budget, $8,733,620.
Second that.
Questions and comments? Does anyone have anything to talk about on the fire department budget? Nobody has anything to talk about on an $8.7 million budget. Jennifer and Michael.
I just wanted to add, because we've learned this from the facilities department, some of the work or the coordinating of stuff is being done by the facilities department, but the work that the budget amounts are in the fire department budget. Give some background.
Michael.
I didn't see it in your report today, not about this information, what staffing levels in the different locations through the day, or does the fire department keep numbers on what they consider to be staffing numbers as the day goes on to the different locations?
Yeah, I think it's fixed. Like, I don't know the numbers offhand, but I feel like it's fixed. Like it's not like something they decide every day.
I think, last time I had data, it was 19.
Yeah, and that's where the OT comes in.
They don't get those numbers fixed in the union contract. Yeah, last time I checked, it was 19.
Yeah,
And they might have lowered it a little bit, but I'm not sure.
and it's to the point where even if,
That includes all the fires, 3 fires.
so for whatever reason, someone doesn't come in, another person can't go home. Like, it's like, I don't know if it's a law, but
It's in their contract.
Yeah.
They call it minimum band.
Exactly, that's the term.
But that's less the point of my question than as to where they are actually stationed during the day. Big question here is, do we need the fire station at Park Circle, the physical real estate?
I believe there was a study done, a decade ago.
Well, we came to rebuild it.
Yeah.
Annie?
Well, so let me add a couple of things. First of all, in answer to your question, one of the reasons that we rebuilt Park Service Station is because getting a fire truck to a lot of East Arlington quickly, it's more quickly from Park Street than from either Highland or Central, because Park Street can go up a route to and around. And that's part of what the study determined. Okay? And then I would just like to say that when I first got on the select board, one of the first things I did was ride along with each of the chiefs just to kind of see how the department worked and so on and so forth. And minimum manning is super important because it's super important to, when there is a fire, getting a minimum number of firefighters there so that you have 2 in and 2 out, and getting them there in less than 4 minutes, which is the national standard. So 19 may feel high to you, but if you are at Park Circle Station and you're gonna respond to a fire and your truck is going out, you need 4 guys on the truck. Because 4 people on the truck, station has a problem. So, because in order to be safe, you need 2 people in and 2 people out, and you need to get there within 3 minutes to respond to the fire in order to put the fire out before a thing called flashover occurs. At which point the building is going to be built and it's lost, including anybody who may be in it. So, you know, and I, at the time, asked the question that Michael asked about the planning department, which was, you know, what do you guys do all day? They are continually maintaining gear, working on their fitness so they can continue to go in and out of those buildings, in addition to making medical calls where often a fire truck goes with a medical call because they may need more than just the 2 ambulance guys to assist the patient who may have to be carried down a bunch of stairs or whatever. And they are also, in addition to maintaining their equipment, continuing training. So that's what the fire department does.
Michael, did you have anything else?
So we're relying upon 10-year-old data for response times and what's possible.
Is that a question or a statement?
Point-to-point transit time across town. I don't think we had the same technology for signal preemption where public safety vehicles can, you know, actually adjust the signalized intersections along the course of their routes to block the intersections and turn everything else red to be able to just speed right through the way. There are other changes. I don't think we can leave that question as done and answered from 10 years ago.
David?
I do believe they have a mechanism on some of the traffic, the newer traffic signals, they can control the signals.
That's right.
Yeah. So they put that in. And usually with the fire station at the Park Circle, as long as I've been around, I've been around a long time, that has been debated, debated whether to have it, not have it, and like Andy had pointed out, the final was because of response time, and we also cover the mutual aid, we cover Belmont, we cover Lexington out of that station. And they also, they respond as a piece of apparatus to all the calls at Craig Village and the Howard's house, including the restroom, but the restroom's coming from Highland. So they respond first. It's part of that, what they do. So I just want.
All right, so Chuck, Dean, Topher, and.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I asked Captain Conrad for a copy of the report. I have the consultant report that was done, I think it was probably more than 10 years ago. And I haven't received a response yet. But as I recall, I could be wrong, as I recall, the report recommended that we did not need the Park Circle Station and that it was built because at the time we had horses pulling wagons up the hill. And the consultant, I don't know if he or she recommended that we could meet the need by having an Armstrong vehicle just kind of more semi-permanently stationed up around there with probably state money. So I just want to make that comment, and I'm happy to share the report once I receive it.
Dean?
Yeah, so I agree, Michael, that's a good point to ask. The one thing I would raise is we're talking about the fire department in addition to what Mr. Ruderman said is, I remain, we've done it years, I remain annoyed that we have state laws that make the cost of the fire department more than it should be, right? So we're required to staff our own town, okay? Even though if you map every house in Arlington to the closest fire station, you'll find out a whole bunch of the closest station is in Belmont Center, but we can't coordinate with Belmont. That's why you end up with these obnoxious situations that people have gone and documented it, where towns on borders have built fire stations back to back, which is the stupidest thing you could do for public safety, but it is the best thing to do to maintain antiquated systems, right? And so what makes the Park Circle situation actually more annoying is when Belmont moved their station from the middle of the center to the edge of the center and can shoot like hell up that hill, I would bet anyone here the Belmont Fire Department can get to Park Circle before the Arlington Fire Department, because they have a straight shot through. They're up the hill, they're right by the Belmont Hill School, they're over the bridge and they're there. It's that quick. Arlington has to, from the Highland Station has to come down Mass Ave, and it's got all sorts of mess, and then they've got to look the way up Park. This is the larger fundamental problem, and we talk about it every now and then, like we should do something, we bring it to our state senators and state reps, and they're like, oh shit, we don't want to fight with them. We don't want to fight with unions, they're powerful, they're scary, and then they walk away. And that still becomes a problem. The taxpayers end up paying a lot of money in unnecessary costs just to maintain useless structures for no reason. There, that's my soapbox.
Topher?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention what do they do all day with the call? I mean, I think I've seen the calls this year, but the vast majority, like 80%, are medical calls.
Absolutely.
And there's very few actual fires.
Yep.
Comparatively speaking, I mean, there's lockouts, there's power lines down, there's hazardous waste, there's all kinds of other things. So, take a look at the breakdown on SharePoint. That will be illuminating.
Okay.
So when they did the study, and I think it was more than 10 years ago.
I think it was 15 years ago.
Yes, when they did that study, the other thing they looked at was response times all over town and where could we not get to in 4 minutes. And where we can't get to in 4 minutes is basically R0, it's precinct 13, and the nearest fire station to precinct 13 is in Winchester. So to Dean's point, it's not just that Belmont could better serve us, it's that Winchester also could, and that in fact we have a gap. Because everywhere else in the town, we know we can get there fast, but getting to 13 is hard.
My character is being balanced, it's better example.
Fine. So, and to what Topher was saying, I didn't mean to imply that the guys are just sitting around training all day. They are responding to all these medical calls. You have to think of the fire department as an emergency medical service that also happens to respond to fires, not the other way around, which probably rename the department. So, anyways, off my former selectman's soapbox now.
Ellen, you have something? Anyone else on the fire department budget? All right, we have a motion, it's been seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, all right, all in favor, raise your hand. Opposed and abstention. 14-0. Yep. All right, John, there, anything else?
Inspection. Need any more still after that. So the inspection budget is on page 132. The only item of note in either the salaries or expenses line items is a salary line, which is 5.3% higher. That's because they actually have filled all their positions. I mean, this is the first time since I've had inspections that they haven't had any vacancies. So, when it comes to that, and everything else is essentially level funded. Did get some questions from Topher. First one is, do we have enough personnel to meet the demand for permits and inspections? And Mike said, at this point, yes. And that the demand is really sort of push demand rather than pull. It really depends on what's happening with the market in terms of property being rented or.
Yeah, there's all.
Yeah. On the total permit revenue, the report is up on SharePoint. I can go over it if people want, and I can pull it up. Give me a second. So it's actually fairly level. They're averaging something roughly around 3,000 total permits per year. The big share of obviously is building, and then plumbing, gas, wiring. So that whole report is there. Total revenues for fiscal 25 is 3.2 million, and they're estimating only 2.8 in fiscal 20. In fiscal 25, so the 24 actual was 3.2. Then they, Mike also provided some detailed charts from the OpenGov permitting applications, so you can see those. And then the other questions about renovations versus full demos and new construction. They didn't have that specific data, but they did estimate that last year there were about 10 full demos and new construction, so the vast bulk of it is contracted services, which is line item 53,006. The bulk of that, about 2,500 to 4,000 is for Wi-Fi, iPad, Wi-Fi, and support. And then they have some left over from those miscellaneous services needed. Then the last one about training. The bulk of it is for training on new regulations and codes. The entire mass building code is being replaced. This year there's a 10th edition that was effective October, and it will entirely replace the 9th edition this July. So our inspectors have to get fully up to speed on it. And then there's also the new stretch energy code. So they can get some of the training for free from the state and from various trade associations, the Mass Building Commission and Inspectors, CIA, Mass Building Commission Inspectors Association, and then also another association, the Building Official Certification Committee, getting much stricter on continuing education. So that actually caused us to turn the question around and ask him, is the 2,000 you got really enough for the training? And he said he'd like to revisit that next year. But it really goes back to the question of you really want to be confident that your inspectors really know the code.
Yeah.
So that is it in a nutshell. And let me just get back to the, I'm going to move that we approve the inspections total budget for 26 at $580,609.
Second.
Excuse me, thank you. You mentioned at the beginning that the reasons the salary was up, did I understand correctly, was that they don't currently have vacancies?
They fill the position.
Oh, which position was that? I don't see, like often that shows up on the salary detail as previously being vacant.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and compare it to last year.
Because it, on first glance, it looks more like the individual positions just increased.
I think it's a combination.
Okay. Because a vacancy wouldn't, I guess I'm confused why, if the vacancy was previously budgeted, it shouldn't change the budget.
So I think it's probably just general increase of funds.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Jordan?
The salaries temp is, with all the positions filled, is that more like to cover like, inspections if like a wire inspector was out and have an alternate?
John?
Just a quick question that came to my mind with the assessor's budget also. Are the two departments tied in together so that rather than the assessors kind of doing 20% per year that we discussed, if there's construction would add to the basis, the 2.5 basis, does the inspection department automatically notify the assessors? Or is that just?
Assessors look at permits.
Yeah,
Pull permits.
I was gonna say this, I've asked the assessors that, and they say that they do get the information. If people pull permits, they do know about it, they do adjust assessments.
So what, and the reason for the 20%, like doing it every year versus every 5 years, and that getting a better yield of collections, of new construction, why would they be missing these things?
I asked that last year when they were proposing some of this. And it's more if people have been improving the property but not necessarily pulling permits, either because they, you know, a lot of times it's doing an attic or a basement, and so if they add a few outlets, you know, in some cases too, people might not pull permits when they should. So, you know, that's basically, but that's a question I plan to ask about, like, are you going to capture? Because I'm, you know, it's like how much you really capture, given that if they pull a permit, they don't.
Right. So like, I know that they've got a whole new software in the inspection department, right, in the last year or so. Do they, can they spit out reports that would kind of?
Yeah, the permitting is essentially entirely online now.
I looked up last year's budget and it was the record keeper inspections that was vacant last year.
Thank you.
But it was budgeted.
What's that?
But it was budgeted.
It was budgeted, yeah.
Alan and David?
Another quick answer, the permit is based on basically the construction cost, whereas the assessment is based on the value, so if you, which aren't necessarily related, some investments are worth more than others.
David?
Just a point of information, the 3 positions that I know that have been filled in the last year, was plumbing and gas inspector, and also the office manager, in addition to the records keeper, within FY '25, they started filling. There was retirements involved there. Just the answer.
Other questions or comments on the inspection budget? All right, all in favor of 580609, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Does anyone have any other budgets we can do tonight? Let's do the celebrations and flags and things like that. Get those done. I'm looking at page 192. So we talked briefly about Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Patriots Day, and Independence Day when the town manager was in to talk to us. And he explained why that budget was going up to 7,000. These are things we do to fund every year, except for the new cost for Independence Day. Is there a motion to approve $7,000 for, Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Patriots Day, and Independence Day.
So moved.
Is there a second? All right, questions, comments? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. All right, next is flags. $4,500, same amount we've been spending. Is there a motion?
I need approval of $4,500 for display of flags.
Second.
Any comments, questions on that? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. And the last one is town day. Level funded at 5,000. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any questions, discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right. That is approved unanimously. And that may be as far as we can get tonight. Who will have budgets on Wednesday? What budgets will you have?
So we'll have Rep and Rank on Wednesday, and then I would predict libraries for next Monday, and hopefully Health and Human Services for a week on Wednesday.
Anybody else who may have budgets for this Wednesday?
Amy, would you mind just repeating the other budgets you had coming up?
I believe we will have libraries next Monday.
Okay.
And Health and Human Services next Wednesday. Barring there being questions we don't get answered in the meetings or a lot of follow-up, which is really what's hanging up Rec and Rank. We're still waiting on some answers to questions from the day.
And what we have Wednesday?
This Wednesday we'll have Rec and Rank, you know, barring another delay.
Is anyone going to have anything else on Wednesday? No, please,
We're meeting with them on Friday.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to do it for Monday, it depends how much.
I don't want to bring everyone in just for one budget.
I'm happy for the delay. I got complicated questions every day.
Yeah, I just want to keep moving, and I don't want to lose time, but it doesn't make sense to come in just for one budget on Wednesday. So I will cancel our Wednesday meeting this week, but let's try to really get up to speed again next week. And anyone who can get any budget, no matter how small. And this means even the tiny DPW, we've never done that. Like even streetlight, if you can, Julie, more complicated.
Hopefully we'll be able to discuss it.
All right, so work on your budgets, try to get them, get those that are possibly done next week, get them done next week, so we can have a full day on Monday and then a day on Wednesday. All right. Thank you again for David and Sophie for starting us off.
Yeah, good job.
All right, thank you, everyone.
The actual.
Hi, Grant.
It's not.